probably sat minimal people with Swiss pensions over the years, so I've not bothered to go and learn it. I wouldn't say unless you're going to target it, go and learn it. The other one that we don't do a lot of is Irish pensions. It is possible, however, the options available to them often aren't very attractive. So in terms of transfer values, I'll go into transfer values in a bit more detail. But there is some options, but you'd have to have someone with quite a meaty pension for it to be worthwhile you doing. The main area really that we look at from a business perspective is UK pensions. And that's something because it's very easy from an assets under management perspective to pick up AUM. Like, I sat a guy this morning, he's like, Chris, I've not really got anything. I've got 80 grand, bit of property. I'm not really like a big dog for you. Reality is, between him and his wife, she's already transferred one of her pensions a couple of years ago. She's got 280 grand, she's 47. Don't mean anything to her because she can't touch it. It's just numbers on a bit of paper. He's got a final salary scheme and a defined contribution scheme, which I'll go into. I reckon he's got 400 grand, 600-700 grand of money that he didn't know he had. If I can get that under management, regardless of fees generated, because sometimes like she's already transferred it, there might not be a fee generated at the start, but it's an AUM play. If I get that, then that would pay me, let's say 700 grand, pays me about 3 grand a year, let's say. And that will grow while I'm with Devere. Probably a bit more than that. So it's a good way to build up your residual income. But like I say, a lot of the time people don't realise they've got these assets, and it's a lot easier to get something. If someone can't access it and they're 45 and got a pension, can't access it for 10 years, they'll transfer 300 grand of a pension to you to manage. Would they press transfer on a HSBC account and give you 300 grand? Maybe not, because then there's other options available to them. So it's quite a good way to build up your AUM. Now, the main pension types, like I say, I don't know how much of a knowledge of people got about the UK pension market already. Have we got anyone who's looked into it before, or shall I start right from the bottom? Happy to start from the bottom and work up. Yeah? Cool. So, right. So 2 types. The oldest type, I'm conscious of the camera here, pen's crap, is a defined benefit scheme. Now, you don't really get these as much anymore, but if you're speaking to somebody who is, let's say, 40s, I mean, I sat a guy the other day, I was very surprised, he had a Nestle one, he was about 38, he had about 10 years, he got in right at the end. Most of these now, for reasons I'll go into, no longer exist, but effectively I look at these as being like an IOU. So it's a promised income. So you don't have, effectively, you've not got an invested amount in your name. The company is saying, look, when you get to 65 or 60, depending on your retirement age, we will give you X per year. And in simple terms, the way that it's worked out is, and then times by your final salary. So simple terms would be the amount of years in this, which would be X. So let's use this as a 10, for example. So you worked at a company for 10 years. N is what they call like their multiple. Usually it's, or their factor. Usually it's 60. Some schemes have made it 80, so that the number this spits out at the end is less. Say 10 divided by 60 versus 10 divided by 80. 80 gives you a smaller number. So it would reduce the amount that the person would get in retirement. But if we use 60, and then let's say, again, based on this, that the person's leaving salary was £90,000. So what that would then give you, so you're getting 10/60ths. So the amount of years divided by 60, 60 is that set factor. Sometimes 80, sometimes 40, but 90% of the time 60, so we'll use that. So you're getting 10/60ths, so 1/6 of 90,000, which would then give you £15,000 per annum in retirement. Now, with these schemes, what they will then do is it will be index linked largely. So it will be going up in line with inflation. Just for the record, because I think Ree is videoing this, so if you're taking loads of notes, you might want to just go back and watch it again, because I will probably just spit loads of bits out and don't want to lose you. So yeah, 15 grand there, and that will go up in line with inflation. So if you're 40 and you've qualified for that, by the time you're 65, that might be worth, let's say, £25,000 a year. Which is why a lot of these schemes no longer exist. Because when people were originally setting these up in, let's say, the 60s and the 70s, life expectancy was a lot shorter. So for people that looked at it and said, all right, well, if you leave the British Steel at 65, you might live for 10 years. We've got a ring fence at X amount for you. Now people are living a lot longer. What is realised is a lot of these companies don't have enough money in the bank. So because it is an IOU and a promised income, effectively you've got a pool of money. So rather than it just being Karim's pension, that it's his money ring-fenced just for him, it is a larger pool, we're talking the billions of pounds, that is there for the members as a whole, rather than it being Karim's money there, Alex's money there, Mick's money there. So what they've then come up with this issue really is people going, well, we can't afford it. So we're going to run out of money at some stage. So what you have is a lot of the schemes are either regarded as being in a surplus or a deficit. So deficit being that the actuaries have calculated, right, to pay for all of you guys, then we would need £2 billion. However, we've only got £1 billion in the pot, we're £1 billion in deficit. So as a result of that, what we have seen historically is higher transfer values. Now, a transfer value is really where we come into it on these sort of pensions, because the way this works is you've got this 15 grand, and so you've got to wait till you're 65. It's a number on a bit of paper. But for us, we want to look at this and find out really what's going on with the pensions. And our service in reality is a pension review service to start off with. So if you listen to the majority of the guys on the phones and advise if you ever sit in a meeting, especially those first meetings, nobody is talking about transferring your pension. So that can be the end goal, is taking that from being within a provider in the UK and potentially being under our advice and administration. However, avoid talking about that too much at the start. So what you want to do is we are effectively going to do a financial health check on your pension. See if it's fit for purpose. So those are words that I use a lot of the time: financial health check, X-ray, look under the bonnet, deep dive, all those analogies. Effectively, we're going to properly explore what's going on with it. So if you did have a final salary scheme, a lot of people will say, let's use the guy that I had this morning. So he worked for a company 10 years. He then got moved over, so he still works for the same company now, but got moved on to the defined contribution scheme, which is the much cheaper scheme to run. So I said, well, what do you know? And he says, well, I don't really know anything. So what we're hoping to do, if we find someone with a pension, then no matter what sort it is, we want to do what's called a letter of authority, which you might have heard some of the guys talking about in the office. And effectively what this is it's a permission slip, really. And it's permission for us to be able to request information on that person's pension. So the way I always position it, and if we go on the shared drive, we've got, so one of our FCA regulated companies in the UK, Secure Mortgage and Protection, we request the information through them. And my pitch is always exactly the same to clients on it. So look, get it out on the screen share or in front of them, and I'll go, look, very simply what this is a letter of authority, as it says on the tin, but there's a few lines at the bottom, and I always take a couple of minutes to read, well, it takes 30 seconds to read it out to them. And it just says, look, this letter, it authorises a request for information on the above pension scheme or schemes and does not constitute any authority to move the above pension scheme or schemes. Basically, it's saying we're requesting info. And I make that clear to the clients. At this point, it's impossible for me to be able to say, oh, I think you should move your pension. How do we know? It's like walking in, someone going to a doctor's, and again, I use this analogy. I say it's like me walking into a doctor and a doctor going, oh, sound Chris, you need a triple heart bypass. How does he know? He's not done a scan on me. He doesn't know what's wrong with me yet. I don't know what's right or wrong with that pension. So what we're then going to ask for, and especially on the defined benefit schemes where there isn't a pot of money, is we want to know how does it work? Because they all work differently. So there's no fixed rules, I would say. So one is we want to know, look, what's the access age? So this can range for people from age 55 to 65, really. Now, most people, especially over here, will want to retire slightly earlier if they can do. They maybe don't want to work till they're 65. So access age can be quite a big thing because there are other options, again, that I'll touch on, where you can access at 55. So look, Mr. Clark, we need to find out what age can you access your pension. This is a very big one as well for people. Death benefits. So what we want to know is how much of your pension will go where if and when you die. So there's two options on that one as well to be aware of: before and after retirement, which they don't tend to have the same blanket rules. So for example, I had a case with a client of mine. He got offered a 350,000 transfer value from Rolls-Royce, and if he died before retirement, his wife and children simply got a refund of his contributions, which was £1,500. It was like, Chris, where do I sign? Because regardless of anything else, I've got 10 years till I can access this money. If I die in that 10 years, rather than my family getting 350 grand, they get £1,500. So we transferred that. Most of the time, and that was based on before, most of the time what the rules will be is a 50% spousal benefit. So your wife will get 50% of your pension, or your husband will get 50% of your pension until you die. Little nuance with that, and again it's worth asking, especially in this region, is how the age gap between you and your wife. So a lot will have a rule whereby if the wife is more than 10 years younger than them, then there is a reduce, so that 50% gets reduced further based on their age. I.e., if you're 60 odd and you've got married to a 22-year-old bird, then, which can happen over here, then she's got 22, if she's 22 and that person's died, there's a lot of years that scheme's got to pay out for her. So they look at it and go, well, we're going to give you a much smaller amount because financially for us, we can't afford to pay a 22-year-old widower for the next 60 years or whatever it may be. So, but it is something that is a conversation, especially with blokes in this region who may have got wives with a large age gap between them. And it's something for them to take into consideration when we're doing the planning. Whilst we can sort of laugh and joke, it can become quite a real issue. So we need to know what's going on there. And also, we've got the kids factor, i.e. divorcees. So they may not have a wife. Well, they haven't got a wife. So if someone doesn't have a wife, but they've got kids, what happens to that pension? As a rule of thumb, kids will get between them, depending on how many there is, up to 50% until they get to either 18 or 21 if still in full-time education. So there'll be a bit of a residual income for the kids to see them through schooling. After that point, they're on their own. So that again is factors for people. Now, the big bit as well, what we're looking for is the transfer value. So what that is effectively a swap, or you could look at it as almost like a cash out. So what you're saying is, let's use this 15k example. So we've got someone who's got £15,000 a year when they're promised income. They might be 50 now, but they can't access till they're 65, and then they are divorced with kids. So they're looking at it going, well, I want to make sure my kids get as much as possible. So what you get from a transfer value, and what is often called, is a CETV. So that's cash equivalent transfer value. So that's what we're requesting. So that would more than likely come in and around £300,000 as a swap value. So 20 times tends to be, in most economic circumstances, the rule of thumb, 18 to 20 times. We did see when interest rates were really, really low, those go up as high as 40, 45 times were some of the largest that I saw. BP were 40 times, so 10 grand a year or 400 grand. Like you were on the phone, you could work out someone's transfer value, which was great because they were so high. So it became more attractive. So in this scenario, let's say that client is looking at it and going, right, well, I've got 15 grand, but if I die, then my kids get a minimal income, or I've got £300,000. Now, question is, you've got the cash equivalent transfer value, but what are we going to do with it? So the two main phrases that you will hear is a SIP and a cure ops. Has anyone heard that either of those phrases before knocking around? So I'll start with cure ops, wrong pen again. Cure ops, because we don't tend to use them as much, but especially in this region, but it's worth being aware of what they are. So that stands for a qualifying recognised overseas pension scheme. Now, historically, the two main regions in this region that we've looked at for transferring them to were Malta and Gibraltar. So within those jurisdictions, you could actually take your money out of the UK. Now, that's still very popular in Europe. However, as of about 6 years ago now, they introduced, if you were a non-EU resident and the cure ops wasn't based in the country you're in, a 25% tax charge. So if you're a Spanish resident, you can transfer to Malta, no problem at all, no tax charge. Move your 300 grand into a Malta cure ops, absolutely fine. If you're a UAE resident, because you're non-EU and the cure ops is based in Malta, which we're not residing in, 25% tax charge on day one. So it's not very attractive. And really, with some of the changes that have gone on in pensions, there's not much difference to keeping it in the UK. So this is something to be aware of. And when we're looking at it, and if you're sat there doing a fact find, and Karim's had a couple of these recently, whereby we've sat down with people and they've got historic cure opses. Now the running costs on those, and historically for when we transfer pensions, a lot more expensive for clients than what they are now. So it's definitely worth exploring. Don't just see it as, oh yeah, you've already transferred into a cure ops. Say, look, well, can I get some information over? Can you send me some information so I can do an x-ray? In the same way that we would have done a letter of authority, we can just request the info. They've got a statement. And we can potentially look to pick up that AUM. But also, it may be the one I did last night, 35 grand he had with Holborn. Spoke to him, and literally we looked at it and worked out with the running costs he was paying in the funds, 4%, 5%. We can move it over and get that down to around 2%. So we've done that. I charged him a fee for doing it because in the long run it's more financially beneficial for him. So it's even less than 2%, I think, all in we got it down to. Charged him 5% on the transfer, so 2.5 on the board. So what's that? 900 quid, something like that. So Malta cure ops, Gibraltar cure ops. Probably a little bit of a longer session, just really going through the intricacies of those. But as a rule of thumb, Malta are much more flexible for clients than Gibraltar when it comes to taking income out. You'd probably want to be in Malta rather than Gibraltar as a UAE resident currently. But for the majority of people, what we now recommend is a SIP. So a SIP is a UK FCA regulated self-invested personal pension, which we have a variety of providers here at the company that we can use. We now charge a fee somewhere between 0 and 5% to transfer, so it's a fee-based advice, more traditional UK, European, US style advice, rather than a commission that might be generated from another product. So it's more explicit, there's no lock-in periods for the clients. So again, that's more when you're doing the product training, but to give you an idea, that's how it sits now. It is effectively we're giving UK advice in a non-UK environment. So UK, FCA regulated. Now the big things for a lot of people is you can get access at 55, that is going to go up to 57 in 2028, but still 8 to 10 years earlier than if you're in a lot of your other schemes. You're also getting 100% goes to the beneficiaries of your choice. So if you die before 75, then 100% goes to the beneficiaries of your choice with no tax to be paid at all. If you do die after 75, then your beneficiaries pay tax at their marginal income tax rate. So there is a taxation there. If you died at 85 and you had 100 grand, you left it to 2 of your kids, 50 each, they were already a higher rate taxpayer, let's say, then they would pay up to 40% on that withdrawal. So they've got ability to stagger it and draw it out in a more flexible manner if they wanted to. The other thing as well is funds. So with a SIP, we have a much wider range of fund choices than a lot of people's other pensions. So when we touch on defined contribution pensions, which are effectively a SIP is a defined contribution pension. So that's the more newer style of pension that you get in the UK, where effectively there's a pot of money. So your company's paying in, you're paying in, and it's ring-fenced with your name around it. So Alex is working for HSBC, let's say, he's on 100 grand a year, he's putting 8% of his salary in, so he's putting 8 grand, the company are matching that, so he's got 16 grand going into a pension that's being invested. So that is what a defined contribution scheme is, in essence, and that will then have different funds, ETFs, mutual funds in it. Again though, that just because it works in the same way in essence as a SIP, doesn't mean that we're not going to be able to transfer that pension. Because again, what we're asking for with people is we're actually reviewing whether this pension is also fit for purpose. So what we're looking to ask there is questions such as where are the funds invested? Who is managing that money? What returns have they got? Those funds that we've got, what are they independently rated? I got a transfer value back through last night for a client, it's 90 grand. He had about 60% was in one half decent fund. The rest was all in bond funds, like 9 bond funds. Didn't actually match his attitude to risk and what he wanted from the pension. All very low rated when I've ran them through TrustNet, which is an independent rating website. So you can put a fund in to Google, put TrustNet, and it'll give you a 1 to 5 star review of that fund. So that was one factor that I'll really be able to play on with that client to say, look, well, your fund that you've got here, yeah, you've got your 90 grand, you're not at risk, there's no deficit, that money is there and ring fence for you, but it's not performing very well. And the options that he has with his provider, he had around 20 different funds to choose from, I think, or maybe 30. With a SIP that we look at, we have a much wider fund range. So we're looking at, some will be 300 to 400 funds, others will be complete open architecture, where you can invest in effectively anything that you wish. So that can be a big winner, even if someone has got this defined contribution, which is this newest style. So rather than it being an IOU, there is a physical pot that's reserved for you. But we can still look at transferring over. I think in this region as well, I know I've picked business up. I've got one on this week that I was trying to do, hopefully will. with Muslim clients who are stuck in pensions in the UK where they're just an automatic strategy, where you've got the exact same thing as anyone else, and actually they would prefer Sharia compliant funds. So yeah, I had a first on Monday with someone who used to play cricket for Yorkshire and has been involved in quite a large racism scandal, so I knew that he was definitely a Muslim, and I said, would you rather like Sharia compliant funds? He was like 100%, knew he would. The minute I said that, he was like, right, we'll look at transferring that pension potentially. So that can be a play, but also you can open that up to a lot of people. And even one that I had the other day, not looking at Sharia compliant funds, but saying to people, look, what would you like from that money? He had 200 grand. And he's like, look, Chris, I don't want anything to do with Israel within my pension. And I was like, well, okay, well, look, I can try and find you a solution whereby we can ensure that every fund we choose has no Israel exposure. He was like, well, I like the sound of that because my pension provider could just suddenly start investing my money in Israel. So it's the control that we're looking for as well. That's the key thing with the fund element. The beneficiaries, the access age can massively help as well. But ultimately for us, what we're looking to do at the start and throughout this process is see what's going on. Especially when on your first few ones, if you get someone who says, yeah, I've worked in the UK, that's where your manager's going to come in. You get that letter of authority signed. It's their name, it's their national insurance number, it's their address and the company they worked at. They put a signature on that. We can go away and dig that information out. At that point, you're not just going to go in blind. Sit down with your manager who'll go through the transfer paperwork with you. Based on the info you've got, then we're going to be able to create a strategy and see whether that is fit for purpose. You might come across the odd one, a defined benefit whereby it's £10,000 a year or the transfer value's 80 grand. All they've got to live for is 8 years. It's not really, it's not a great transfer value, so you actually walk away from it. I walked away from one last year. I said, look, Mr. Client, it's not right for you, but he's gone and done other business since. So, especially even with smaller pots, let's say someone's only got 10 grand, if you've done your fact find and they're saying they want 40 grand in retirement, even if you leave it there, there's still the potential to get a regular saving plan from them as well. So you're not just fully walking away from the business, but it can give yourself credibility. So don't be afraid to do that. But look, most of the time, we can get a solution that will beat what's going on with them. So another one is cost actually here. And then access, which is slightly different. So now with SIPs and with a lot of defined contribution schemes, you've got what's called flexible access, so you can draw money out as and when you see fit. Now, the one that I mentioned yesterday that I got through doesn't have flexible access. So at the retirement age for the client, if let's say at that point he had 100 grand for argument's sake, he has to buy what's called an annuity, which is effectively buying one of those old final salary schemes, like an IOU. So you're swapping your 100 grand for 3 grand a year, 4 grand a year. He's not going to want to do that. He's going to want to be able to take money as and when he sees fit. So again, I can say to him, well, that's what you've got here. Would you rather have a situation whereby you can access the money as you see fit, or get to 100 grand, and depending on what interest rates are, Royal London are going to go to you, oh yeah, that's how much you can get for the rest of your life. And if you die in a day's time, your pension dies with you. Most people go, Chris, I don't want that. I want my family to get my money. So again, when you're sitting down with people, and once you've got that info, it's about questioning and looking at it. And once you've gone through the paperwork associated with it, whether it is a pension such as a DC scheme or a defined benefit scheme, look, Mr. Client, how important is family for you? Because some people will say, do you know what, Chris? The kids are going to get that much. I'm not really that bothered about leaving them anymore. So never presume. But I have had it from clients. Do you know what? I can just have this as a fixed income. They've still got the house. They've still got the £1 million that they're going to get. I'm not that bothered about transferring for this reason. So never presume, but ask them the questions. Look, would you rather a situation whereby you can get this or this? weighted well, most people are going to choose probably the answers that we want. And you get to a factor where you say, right, so what you've said is you'd rather access your pension early if you can. You've said that you want to choose that you want Sharia compliant funds. We've said that you want to make sure that you can name beneficiaries as you see fit. Again, that may come down to it, that people, again, in this region may want to leave their pension as per Sharia law, which again they can do if they want to tick those boxes. It may be that some people don't want to give, they might have got remarried. And again, I've had this scenario where people have got remarried and they say, well, I don't want to leave my wife 100% of my pension. I want to leave my daughter from my previous marriage 60% and my wife can have 40% because she's getting X, Y, and Z. Whereas my current scheme, I'm only able to nominate my spouse and she automatically gets it. So it's working out what's right for people. I think I quite often look at it and say, well, when we get the stuff back, we'll do like a traffic light approach. So green, yeah, it fits the purpose for you. Amber, it's all right. Red, no. So, and we'll work out, and if we've got more reds than we have green, we're going to have to look at an alternative option, i.e. a SIP. If there's lots of greens as we go through and you've got a low-cost pension that's high performing, you can access it early, blah, 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 then we leave it where it is, Mr. Client. Reality is, most of these pensions, there's going to be a better option when we break it down for people. So that's something that really works. One of the hooks with the 55 as well. So for anyone in UAE, Saudi, Qatar and Bahrain, then if they've either been here for 5 years already, or they do not intend on going back within the 5-year period from leaving the UK, i.e. they've been here for 2 years, they're going to stay for a further 3. They're over the age of 55, then they can fully encash their pension tax-free while they're here in the UAE or Saudi or Bahrain. It depends which country you are as to what the process is. Rebecca and Darren in the technical team can help with that, but that can be a really big point for people. Like I've had people with defined contribution schemes that are like a couple of them, and I'm like, well, tell you what I'll do is I'll charge 5%, I'll get you the whole process done, and I'll get all that money. I'm not going to look after you moving forwards, but you want that 100 grand to buy the house of your dreams. All right, cool. Charge me 5% for doing it. I'll show you how to do it, and people charge them, sorry, and people will do that. So we can then consolidate it and then encash it for them. So that again is something that has come into place in the last few years, but is massively important and beneficial for clients over here. Something that we're fortunate to have as a sales angle in this region. The key thing for me is sitting the right people, though, and especially if we're talking about this, you don't want to get too hung up either on rubbish pensions, ultimately. And after a while, you're going to start to realise, look, the older the people are, the more years they've worked in the UK, the more established those companies are they work for, the likelihood is they'll have a bigger pot. So if you've got someone who worked for Barclays for 20 years, yeah, brilliant, let's have a proper chat about your pension. If you've got someone who from 16 to 21 just says supermarket attendant at Tesco's, they might not even, probably not even a member of the scheme. If so, they've got hardly anything in it. Let's touch on it. We can get you a valuation, but it's moving on relatively fast. So working out what people have got. But importantly on that side of things, yes, we've got our 2 main elements, defined benefit schemes. So historically, more expensive to run, an IOU, 50% spousal benefit are your key features. Schemes have then moved over because they're to a defined contribution such as this that's cheaper to run. The reason why, again, why we can still, this becomes more popular is because these are cheaper to run, you're not getting any good advice. Like often it's a lifestyling strategy where you're just depending on your age, you're given X, Y, or Z as an investment strategy. Or for most people, you tick a box when you join a job. What's your attitude to risk? High, medium, low. High. Yeah. You get a tick high, and then from there, or tick medium, you've never looked at it for 20 years. They've never changed anything. And actually, when we look under the bonnet and charges here, as I mentioned, people are paying 1% a year to get a letter sent to an address that they've not lived in for 20 years, or they can look to work with us, pay a slightly higher fee, but get an advisor with a qualified, working in a qualified and regulated environment, getting all the same tax status as that, but greater fund options, potentially access earlier, a strategy that's tailored around them, regular reviews. Most people look at it and go, yeah, well, that makes complete sense. Why would I not? But it's about just approaching it in the right way, and in that review style. Look, let's get you your pen, fill in the letter of authority, managing expectations, define contribution schemes. We can be looking at anything from a matter of days to maybe a month maximum to get a valuation, because they have got, there's a physical money there. It's like logging into online banking, something there. Final salary schemes, because you're working out. It's like when they ring up the banker on Deal or No Deal, someone's got to work out what offer am I going to give you. So they have a team of actuaries that can take up to a couple of months. I mean, I've been waiting on one for nearly 3 months at the moment. So just managing expectations. It's not like, oh yeah, sign this and I'll sit back tomorrow and I'll get you 300 grand from nowhere. But once we do that, we can then go through that process. You've got your managers. That's what Darren and Rebecca as well are really good at, sitting down with you. They'll join you on meetings if you do want you to. If you've got someone who you're like, right, this guy's going to be really, really tricky, and then you work out who the best person may be for the fit. Again, if it's someone who's 60, Darren might be perfect for them. If you've got a woman in her 40s, maybe actually bringing Rebecca in is going to be more inclined for the sales. So utilise those as well. Think about everything we're doing is looking at it from that business perspective. So yeah, right, just because Darren's the boss of that section doesn't mean we always go with Darren and vice versa. So working out what's right for you. So that's the key area. I mean, national insurance, I think, has that been touched on with anyone before, or do you want me to run through anything on national insurance? Okay, so this is our sort of the way we make the money, in essence, is getting the transfer into the SIPs. Like I say, we're charging and then we're charging ongoing. But quite an easy way to get people in, and something that I would say a lot of my meetings are on, and I've had some really, really successful. The guy who come in today, we're looking at pension transfers potentially even a property, which Tyler just booked him in on his national insurance. Did a quick Zoom with him before Christmas. He come in with the forms to update his national insurance, and then we've obviously discussed more from there. So it's a value-added service, and don't be afraid to tell clients that. So your UK national insurance, just to go back to the start, we can help people maintain contributions whilst they're abroad. So effectively, we've got, that's about right, 10, 0. So you've got different key dates to remember. So to get the full UK state pension, which currently is around 11.5 grand, you need 35 years worth of contributions. Now, to get any form of UK state pension, you need 10 years. So if you've got 9 years national insurance record, nothing. Again, this is a really good conversation to have with people, even non-UK expats, because there is the option for them to still be able to be entitled to something. If you find a Spaniard, a South American that's worked in the UK, they might not even realise that they're entitled to some form of UK pension. So what we can do is we can not only find out what they are entitled to in future, but we can also from there potentially even increase that entitlement. So 10 years gets you some form of state pension, and what you find a lot over here is you get a hell of a lot of people with less than 10 years. British nationals, people who've worked in the UK for a few years. Now, as long as you've worked for more than 3 years, then that allows you to pay whilst you're overseas. So if you're working overseas, then you can pay what's called voluntary class 2 contributions, which allows you to maintain it and get the same benefits as what you were doing if you're in the UK, where I think it's sort of 10, 11% of your salary at times, for £160 per year. So that gets you your credits. You're getting a reduced rate because, one, it's deemed you're working abroad. So I always say to, look, Mr. Client, that we're fortunate in this region, we don't pay any social security. If we were paying social security, let's say in France, then the reason why we get this is because we're working abroad, we get the reduced rate. It's deemed we're paying social security somewhere. We're not. Voluntary class 2 contributions at 160 quid. So per year. If you've got a spouse, let's say, who's not working, then circa 900 quid is for voluntary class 3 contributions. So again, gets you the same credits, amount of years, but it's that higher amount because it's deemed that you're not paying into any form of social security anywhere. So what you can do is you can backdate for up to 6 years. So let's say I've worked in the UK for 8 years, been overseas for 10. Well, I can't backdate for the full 10, but what I can do is I can go from 8 years, pay just short of 1,000 quid to then get me to 16 years. So that automatically takes me from 8 years to 14 years, automatically takes me from having no state pension entitlement to 14 years, which then would be, and the way they work it, it's prorated. So in that scenario, it'd be 14 over 35, so approximately 3/7. So about, what's that, 4.5 grand, something like that, for 5 grand's worth of entitlement for every year for the rest of my life in retirement, for 1,000 quid now. So it's it's a no-brainer if you're speaking to anyone with a UK connection. The state pension as well has got what's called a triple lock, which means, in layman's terms, it'll go up by a minimum of 2.5% per year. Actually went up, I think, just short of 10% last year because of how high inflation was. But it's a good talking point to get to someone, and especially when you're speaking to people who have been overseas for a while. The people who are usually the do not calls, the fuck off brigades. Look, I've had these calls a million times. Well, do you know what? They've had it a million times because they've been overseas for 15 years. So what that means is we can offer them some value because they've not heard it before and they've been overseas 15 years. They've got a big gap in their state pension. Look, Mr. Client, what I can do is I can show you how to fill in some of these gaps, because then not only can you backdate, but you can also pay moving forwards. So current retirement date for most people we speak to is going to be 67. So we can pay moving forwards at that rate as well. So you can get very, very easily for people, get them back on track on their national insurance. So this is your state pension. It's not transferable. There is no physical value to it. It's a government IOU. But it can help you get in with people. So I think if you go on shared drive, go into training, maybe if you can send it round, and Rebecca's got some notes from the training she did for BDAs on national insurance, which goes into a little bit more detail on that, but it's a good angle. Just a little side note as well, when I mentioned about not being able to transfer this, you can't transfer anything that is government related. So final salary schemes for teachers, police, firefighters, army, you can't transfer. So if you do come across a teacher who goes, hey, I was a teacher for 25 years, just be aware you will not be given a transfer value. And so anything that is state related. But like I say, I think this is a very good tool, because when you're speaking to someone and you've done the meeting, you've got on the screen share, showed them the forms, and again, I'll get Rita to send it round. We've got it's a very simple 2-pager that we send off to HMRC in Newcastle, and we've got a dummy version, so it's pre-populated. So it's really easy for anyone to complete. But send it over, we can check it off, and then very simply, I just get Maria at reception to DHL it for my clients, and then send them that. They go, oh, cheers for that, I really appreciate that you've done that. And then before you know it, for the cost of a bloody DHL, which touch wood never get charged back on, they've gone, oh, you've really helped me with that. Oh, by the way, Chris, got this pension, or I've got this 50 grand, because they've built up that trust level. So it's a really nice way in. I always say it to clients, so I said, look, realistically, I'll do this, but it is pro bono. It is if I sit with you and feel that you feel that I've done a good job and I've helped you out, I'd like to think you'd be open-minded that if there was anything else that come up, then you'd come to me. If at the end of it, that's all we need to sort out and I've done it, look, I've spent half an hour of my time, I've done my good deed for the day. But let's have a sit down, I'll sort that for you. If we come across anything, yeah, sounds, we'll look at it. If not, so be it. Most people go, yeah, that's fair. And then before you know it, they're thinking in their head, oh yeah, well what else is there that I can discuss? Oh, that phone call about that pension. Oh, can you help me with this? Oh, my missus is just going to inherit 100 grand. What should I do? Very soon those doors open, and because we've approached it in a better way than a lot of the time, people just being, oh yeah, do you want to transfer your pension on a cold call, or do you want to do a retirement plan? People are a bit hesitant. So it's a way of getting in round the back door that I think is definitely well worth doing, and it's a nice, easy approach. Like I say, Rebecca's got some good stuff on it. It's not too complex to get your head round as well, to start off with. And they're very simple. You go into the meeting with the forms, you take in that letter of authority because you've checked their LinkedIn. You know realistically, right, they've got a couple of pensions here. Let's see what we can get out of it. So does that all make sense really? So you've got your 3 facets, then you've got defined benefit, your final salary schemes, which is that IOU, which is a company IOU. You've then got your defined contributions, which is a pot of money. They paid in, you've paid in, the more modern schemes. So anyone in recent years, bless me, thank you. And then you've got your national insurance, which is your UK state pensions. So those are your main elements of UK pensions. Like I say, it is possible to look at some Irish schemes, it is possible to look at some Swiss schemes. I'm pretty sure definitely on Switzerland there is stuff on the training portal that has been done, so have a little look at that. But I mean, don't spend, unless you're going to target it and make it in your business plan that you're really going to go at it, don't spend a load of time looking at areas that you may or may not come across. But for a lot of people, this is a nice intro one, because especially with British clients, people who are British, you always feel like there's going to be an area of rapport you've got a good chance with. But I mean, I've worked with people of all nationalities who've done extremely well with UK pensions. We worked with an American guy, Berkey, and he did really well because people didn't expect him to know about pensions because he was American. So when he did, and he came in and it was like bang, 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 it actually probably gave him more gravitas than if I would have, because the British people didn't expect it. But it's a good angle in. Obviously, when we're doing the full fact find, if you've got a 100 grand pension, okay, well, you're not going to retire on that. We can then still assess your shortfall. And before you know it, you've picked 3 or 4 bits of business up from that one client, maybe not now, but over the course of a year to 18 months, that then you're going to, you've done a small pension, but you've still done maybe 10 grand's worth of business over the course of it. So, yeah, with it being fee-based, and sometimes you might have to negotiate slightly on fees with people, but it gets you in, and you've got that residual income as well, which is that AUM, which is what I think more and more people are looking at. I know we've discussed it, Karim. If you get to, for argument's sake, you get to 10 million under management, well, that's £50,000 you come into on January. That's your basic salary. So there is a lot of pensions out there as well that have been transferred into SIPs or cure-ops where their advisors have buggered off, or that they're in expensive funds with other companies. And I think that objection handle is probably worth another session at times about how to sit down and try and take clients from other companies. Chris Douglas has got some really good spreadsheets on that side of things that I'm sure you can probably pepper Reese to get off Chris. But it will, getting people existing AUM is definitely, we want the commissions to be going, but have it in the background. And if you can be picking up 200 grand, 300 grand a month, let's say, you get to 3.5 million, 4 million by the end of the year, then you're going into next year going, do you know what, rather than starting on 0, I'm actually starting on 20, 25 grand. So, and then you do the same the year after, and it builds from there. Any questions on that? I know there's a lot of bits here, there and everywhere.